Hey, Dane, just before we get started, what do you want on your pizza this weekend?
Definitely pepperoni, potentially meatballs, no anchovies, and minimal vegetables.
Do you want some PTSD as well?
Yes.
A side of it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'll put it in that order before we get started. Are we rolling?
Yes, we're rolling.
Oh shit. Okay. We'll have to wait. Can you survive another couple of moments without some Zal with PTSD in it?
I think I can get
or
that
missing
done.
limbs or anything like that. Be taken care of. Anyway,
let's just try to survive this episode.
Correct. We're trying to keep it succinct.
Listen, a lot of points that could get it. Well, maybe just one topic that could get us canceled. That's going to be the first one in episode 106. We're going to lead off the Culture Corner talking about our home state is in the news. And usually, as usual, Kansas is never in the news for good news.
Neither of our states are ever in the news for good news. It's always Kansas is, racist, and then Florida man shits on traffic.
It's just like
or has sex with an alligator. Who knows?
Let me tell you, David and I know how to pick a state to live in.
Howdy. If you got headlines, we're coming to you.
So we're talking about the Kansas abortion vote in the Culture Corner. You'll be surprised to learn that all of the headlines and narratives around it aren't exactly holding much water. Then in the Epstein didn't kill himself segment, we're talking taxes. And shocker, shocker, when the government says we're only raising taxes on these 5 people, it's eventually going to be all of us. And the last one, the big one, the major geopolitical event for this week, Pelosi gallivanting over to Taiwan to do Pelosi things, I guess. And,
to invest in them as well.
Potentially moving us, one notch closer to nuclear annihilation. But we digress. We hope by the end of this episode, you're smiling and laughing.
She just wanted to show that she had the biggest dick in the room. All right?
Listen, if it's measured by the size of her insider traded portfolio, she almost always does.
You can't prove that. It's her husband making the investments, you asshole.
Anyway, with that brief Cliff Notes out of the way, David, are we ready to jump in?
I was ready yesterday.
Let's do it. Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 106, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/106. You can also find it on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. You can get the videos on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey, and you can link up with us on all our socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, for continuing content throughout the week. Just jump in those comment sections, like, share, subscribe everywhere you see us, and help the sane space grow. And from our video guy, we have
what's his name again?
An additional request for you this week. Look down in the description or the notes on the videos, YouTube, whatever, and you will find links for how to support the show, which, according to him, we are adding for this week the opportunity for you to support us with Bitcoin if you do not want to do cash. So, we know there are some people out there who will support us with Bitcoin. We don't know if they're yet listening or viewing, but if you are, that will be how you can do so. David, you want to grovel for money, or are you just going to leave that completely up to me?
No, I'm just going to say thanks, video guy, for coming up with that idea. Nameless, NPC, useless piece of shit video guy that will not be mentioned ever again on this podcast.
In the future when we're bigger and we have to hire more employees, I promise this is not how we'll treat all of you. Just him.
Just him. Because every time he hears his name, it makes him a little happier, and I want to take that from him. I don't want him to be happy.
You love knowing that you have control over his happiness in some regards.
No. We're going to be benevolent rulers.
That was a big word. That was a big word for Elmo.
Yeah, that's why I tripped over it a couple of times. But I got it eventually.
So
Nancy Kerrigan.
Kicking off the episode this week with the Culture Corner, as we discussed, we're talking about the Kansas abortion vote. Now, without getting into a ton of details about it, I'm sure unless you've been living under a rock, you've seen basically leftist Twitter and, the establishment media, regular NPC people shouting from the rooftops how this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, because don't you know, Kansas is this super, super deep red, redneck. They hate women and anybody with a skin tone slightly darker than Larry Bird. And so if they're voting to keep abortion legal, then that just means that everybody in the whole world just loves every aspect of abortion, all the way up until live birth abortion, right? Isn't that the takeaway from the Kansas vote, David?
I lost it at they've never been to liberal city, Kansas. If they think that we don't have people in there without Larry Bird's complexion, I think that's your words exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So as is our goal on this podcast to destroy memes, and listen, memes aren't just the funny pictures. Sometimes they crop up in headlines and narratives about certain topics to get you to think in one direction or keep your thought process inside of a carefully constructed box that they provide for you so that you don't think further than whatever their room temperature IQ opinion of the topic is. And on this topic, let's start with destroying the concept of Kansas is this super deep red state.
Please do.
2 out of the last 5 governors of Kansas, including the current sitting one, have been Democrats. The one before Laura Kelly, the current governor, was Kathleen Sebelius, not the one right before, but what I'm saying is the Democrat governor.
She actually worked her way up into the Obama,
all the way to HHS
cabinet
secretary, who helped roll out, of all things, affordable health care. So if you want the government controlling your health care, including apparently exterminating your babies at will, Kathleen Sebelius is your girl, and Kansas has offered her up.
Can we ease into the topic before we just start lobbing grenades into other bunkers? Can we just tiptoe with elegance over here for a couple of moments?
Okay,
I know it's ironic to come from me to say that, but
so contrary to popular belief, Kansas is not super, super deep red, and actually, like a lot of not heavily populated states, it is controlled by its few municipal centers. So like Wichita has a heavy blue voting base, where David and I are from. And then the suburbs around Kansas City that are on the Kansas side of the border, also heavily blue. And that's how you wind up with Democratic governors and things like that, is those districts control, just like New York City controls for upstate New York, and LA controls for Northern California.
South Florida controls for...
Right. Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties control for Florida. So it's
sometimes Orange County too. That's more purple, right? Yeah.
So people think, because again, people only pay attention to the general election every 4 years, and they see it always go Republican for especially the presidential candidate, but the representatives and senators are usually Republican. And so they think, oh, super, super red state. But that's not exactly how it goes. And especially not in a vote like this, which the vote in Kansas, and this gets into our next point to destroy from the meme aspect, is the vote was about the proposal to amend the Kansas Constitution to say that you do not have a constitutional right, according to the Kansas Constitution, not the federal, you do not have a constitutional right to an abortion in Kansas. Now, the reason why this amendment was proposed is because in 2019, the Kansas Supreme Court actually heard a case on that question and actually did rule that you do have, according to the Kansas Constitution, regardless of what the feds say, according to the Kansas Constitution, you have a right to have an abortion. So that might be shocking to the people who want to put forward the narrative that Kansas is super red, because even before Dobbs, the Kansas Supreme Court was telling Kansas citizens, you have a constitutional right to abortion, meaning legislatures can't outright ban it in all cases.
Neat.
I was going to say, that one got you stumped.
I didn't what am I supposed to add to that? Yeah, so history dictates what we do in the future.
So that's kind of not only a piggyback on the point of saying that Kansas isn't super red, but it's also saying that the narrative, the headline about this vote was that it was a yes or no vote. And if the yeses won, then tomorrow abortion in Kansas is illegal. And that's not what the vote was. The vote was, should we amend the Constitution to basically supersede what the Kansas Supreme Court said? And the no's won. But the leftists, the pro-abortions, are running with that, saying, well, that means that Kansans are embracing abortion universally.
And in fairness,
they're not. That's not what the vote was about.
In fairness, the left needs any little small win that they can run with nowadays because they have been few and far between. I don't know why my tongue's not working tonight. Lips, teeth. I didn't do my warm up.
That's why.
I didn't do my warm up.
So do it now for the
lips,
people.
Teeth, tip of the tongue.
Give them a
lips,
behind the scenes sneak
lips,
peek.
Teeth, tip of the tongue. An arsonist has oddly shaped feet.
I thought you were gonna go with the classic Sally sells seashells.
No, fuck that. That's advanced. That's the next level. The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. There we go. That's all of it. That's all I had.
All right, so we won't have any more tongue slips from David for the rest of the
Hopefully
episode.
not. My alacrity and dexterity of my tongue is up to par now. Hopefully.
And the next meme, well, this isn't really a meme so much as just demonstrated behavior over and over and over again. Now, I have a friend, again, you can wipe your ass with what I'm about ready to say because it's just an anecdotal thing that, I could just be making up. But I have a friend who sent me a picture of his friend's yard sign who said, vote yes on the amendment. He was anti-abortion. Yes to allow the amendment so that abortion would at least be put in more jeopardy in Kansas. And that sign had spray paint with an X on it and was kind of knocked over. And he and I were just kind of talking about it thinking, isn't that like, even when they win, they're crybabies. Like in the article that we're going to link to from NPR, again, pretty leftist publication, NPR interviewed some of the people who were behind the yes vote campaign, the anti-abortion people. And they had things to say like, well, this is a setback for us, but the fight to protect human life, is going to go on and we're going to keep fighting and da-da-da. They're just like, pick themselves up by their bootstraps. We lost this one. Let's get them next time, champ. And then the winners are running around, Xing out, knocking over signs of people they disagree with politically.
It's kind of like the people that boarded up their windows and shops and so on and so forth before the election on, what was it, November 3rd? And then all of a sudden, nothing happened.
Right. Because
so
were they
really
boarding up because Biden was going to win?
Trumpers are going to fucking light this whole goddamn nation on fire because they're just deplorables. And how about like, and then all of a sudden it was just crickets. And granted, they came out and said the election was fake and yada, yada, yada. But at least they didn't burn down buildings. At least they were peaceful in that protest, unlike other peaceful protests before them.
And the reason I bring that up is to really drive home the meta point. And the meta point is, and I think both sides do this, so let's be fair, but it's really bombastic when the left loses.
Don't do that.
Is democracy, right? The sacred thing. And the thing about principles, right? Principles are supposed to be unchanging regardless of changing circumstances. That's what a principle is. And the principle of democracy as being sacrosanct is supposed to be, again, universal across the board. Whether your side wins or loses, it was democratic and therefore it's just, it's whatever, we all need to follow along, yada, yada, yada. And the thing about, that behavior in conjunction with the way that they responded to winning is just think in your mind, what would they have done if the opposite was true? Right? If Kansas voted to amend its constitution to allow legislators to eventually pass legislation banning abortion completely, they would have said, those stupid rednecks, this is what you get in red states. This is exactly what we told you was going to happen with Dobbs. Kansas is on the front line of turning us into the Handmaid's Tale. Right? That's what their rhetoric would have been. But since they won, democracy is the greatest thing ever.
We wanted democracy won.
Right.
The good side won. And now I have to hate my co-host for the rest of the episode because all I have is Shaggy running through my head.
Why? Because I said bombastic?
Murderer, stay living like that. Murderer. Anyway, I think that meme's been destroyed. What's the next in the Epstein didn't kill himself episode? Or am I jumping to conclusions, Matt?
You are. There was one more.
Oh yeah, another bullet point.
There was one more because I want to pat David and I on the back for...
We get accolades? Oh
yeah. I want to pat David and I on the back for, and again, this wasn't unique to us. A lot of people were saying to us before Dobbs was decided, and that's the U.S. Supreme Court case, which we've covered that in the past. But what we were saying at the time, and then in the outrage shortly after the opinion was leaked, was despite the scare tactic rhetoric that the pro-abortion people would give you about Dobbs, Dobbs was not a abortion's illegal in all 50 states tomorrow kind of thing. It was a, we're staying out of it, leave it up to the states. And the point about Kansas voting to keep the status quo is this is exactly what we said would happen with Dobbs, is the states are going to decide.
Which
and
is
if
a good
you
thing.
would, and right, and if you would have asked the now pro-abortion people that are shooting off fireworks about the Kansas vote, if you would have asked them before that vote happens, let's say pre-Dobbs, if you would have asked them to rank the 50 states, who is the worst, who's the most draconian in terms of abortion regulations, and who's the best? Kansas would have been near the bottom of the list because the current status quo in Kansas is a total ban after 22 weeks. And Kansas also has a provision which has caused a lot of consternation or legislation that says the expectant mother has to have a sonogram, essentially see the baby before she's allowed to go through it with an abortion before 22 weeks. Now, the pro-abortion side would tell you that's already Handmaid's Tale territory. And all this vote did was preserve that status quo, because presumably if the vote went the other way and you don't have a constitutional right to it, Kansas legislators would have been able to kick the ball completely across the goal line and say, total ban across the board, can't have it. But since that lost, what you have from this vote is a maintenance of the status quo. So the people shouting from the rooftops about how great of a vote this is would have previously put Kansas in the lower half or third of all states in terms of their restrictions. And yet the status quo is a great victory for democracy. And here's the thing that they refuse to admit. David disagrees with me on this point, but I admit that my position that no exceptions for abortion, because life begins at conception, is not a politically popular one. I understand that. I know that if that went up to a vote, most Americans would disagree with me. However, most Americans would also disagree with abortion all the way up to birth. And in some cases, some people propose it past birth, like let the baby on the table and die without resuscitating it. That's also equally unpopular. And that somewhere it's going to shake out in the middle where you're going to have some restrictions, but not too much. Some states are going to pick this, that, or whatever, and you're going to wind up with a Kansas type situation. That's democracy, folks. Dobbs didn't do anything to change that.
Well, the whole point is the side that keeps saying that democracy won or democracy's been removed keeps calling things what they aren't. Hence the Dobbs thing. It's completely, like they were saying, it's going to make abortion illegal in all the states. Well, it didn't. It actually made it possible for you to have a more direct vote on what do you think is right for your state to have a position on. They said the Don't Say Gay bill is an anti-homosexual bill, and all they were saying is that we probably should just leave fucking children alone with sexuality until they become inquisitive of it. Or, I don't know, maybe have the mental capacity to conceive of sexuality and gender and so on and so forth. Follow the science. Well, it turns out that the science wasn't exactly science because they hadn't even conducted all of the science yet. And now we're finding out more of the science later after the science has been injected into your arm 3 or 4 times. So all I'm saying is...
You're saying that to say this.
Maybe when the purple hair just starts screaming in the streets that they just said, don't say gay, maybe do your own research. Maybe look at the bill yourself. I don't know. It's crazy to me. And maybe have a memory longer than 5 seconds and remember what they said last time before they start ranting about this thing. No.
Right.
I don't know. Just an idea. Just a thought. Just a careless thought.
So when you read the headlines about the Kansas vote this week, and when you hear them going forward, and it's all a black and white thing, this is either everybody supports abortion all the way up to birth, or everybody hates it completely and wants it completely outlawed in all cases. Don't fall for that, because that's not what this vote was about. That's not what the Kansas citizens turned out to say. It literally did nothing but maintain the status quo, just like Dobbs literally did nothing but say preemptively, hey, Kansas, you want to say in what abortion policies govern your daily lives? You can handle it at the state level. That's it. Nothing, no good and evil, no anything like that. It's actually the principles of democracy at work, so they should be excited, and more excited than just when they win. And quit kicking over everybody else's sign just because you disagree with them. That's shitty.
That's my sign. Respect, God damn it. So Dane.
Yes.
On this week of fraudulent claims and misdeeds, otherwise known as Epstein didn't kill himself, what do we have? What's on the docket?
We got a new tax proposal, because if there's one thing I've learned about government in my 30-ish years of life, is that they never have enough from us.
We could have got it done if only we had more of your money.
we would all be in like Jetsons cars and zero emissions, and everybody would be kumbaya, fairies and unicorns and rainbows, if just they had more of your money.
You'd have a 6-pack if the government had more of your money.
So what we're talking this week is President Biden's fiscal year 2023 budget proposal calls for imposing a 20% tax on taxpayers with income and assets above $100 million. We'll get to more of that in a second. And this would allegedly raise $360 billion in taxes. Now, before we go to any more of the details, I just want to focus on that $360 billion. The federal government, pre-COVID times, because they spent a lot more during COVID and since, the federal government spent roughly $4 trillion a year. David, at $4 trillion a year, you know how long $360 billion lasts at the federal level? Just the federal level.
Of course I do, but I'd rather the listeners chime in with their answer. Quick, we'll put a little post up. Click on the right tab.
Well,
give them 5 seconds, Dane.
Oh, sorry. Time's up. So, as my brother likes to say, math in public, $360 billion is about 5 to 6 weeks of funding of the federal government. That's it. So,
what could you do with $3 to $6 billion?
Even a lot more.
You can start your own fucking militia. You could have like a couple of jets.
A lot more than fund my shit for 5 to 6 weeks.
No,
I'll tell
crap.
you that much.
Listen, if you've got $3 to $6 billion and you can't float that a little bit longer than a couple of months, you've got an addiction, sir.
We've been sustaining this podcast for almost 2 years on a shoestring. Okay, we can do a lot.
No budget. We've been fucking in the red for about ever. So if we can make this work, surely the best and the brightest of our country can.
So now, listen, with that little aside, and again, the reason why I bring up that point is to just kind of mock this whole we need to tax the rich kind of thing anyway, because it is clear to anybody that's operating on more than their last 2 brain cells rubbing together for enough friction to have a coherent thought.
Sounds hot.
Is that government does not have a revenue problem. We've made this point before. Revenue has gone up every single year since 2009. Yes, even during the Trump tax cut years, federal revenue increased.
You just find it somewhere.
But we keep running deficits. Now, how would that be possible if it wasn't for what the actual problem is, which is spending? It's not revenue. You can tax the wealthy at 100%. That's going to fund the government for a couple months, and then we're going to be right back in the same hole. But we digress.
I've got an idea.
Yes.
Why do we impose the same thing that they imposed on us on COVID? So in order to right our fiscal budget and our gigantic deficit, maybe Congress, the government, the president, everybody should just go the fuck home for 2 weeks. And let's stretch that, taxpayer money out. Because if they're not there to spend it, it just stays. It's like saving money. If you don't spend your entire paycheck before you get it, maybe you'll have enough for savings that month. I don't know.
You
just
might.
a thought.
You
A
might.
thought. A careless thought.
Well, going back to our thing about incentives, you might have more incentive to do that if it was actually your money instead of coercively stolen from millions of Americans.
When you're a kid, you're like, this is a toy. This is the Terminator toy that I want. It's like, it's $20 for plastic. It's like, I want it now. I understand that you worked 3 hours for that $20 back in 19...
Whatever.
I don't want to call it, but to date myself. But I need this for my personal enjoyment.
So the main meme that's coming out of this, and you hear this all the time from the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, AOCs of the world, right? Is the rich need to pay their fair share, right? They say the rich don't pay anything, which I think by last count, it was something like the 1% or I think the 1% pays like 70 some odd percent of all federal taxes or federal income taxes, sorry. So anyway, the fact that they're not paying their fair share, that's absurd. But the other thing is what the proposal suggests is that it's only going to apply to those with household and assets that exceed $100 million. Now, you're probably looking around and you're thinking, well, that doesn't sound like a meme, Dane. That just sounds like pretty common sense stuff. Not a lot of people have that. So, it's not going to affect that many people. And they have so much money, they can handle it. Well, that's why you come to WMD Podcast, because the reason why that meme circulates is so that they can Trojan horse their way into taxing everybody and get you to support it by just being envious and jealous of the greedy, of the greedy, of the rich, who they say is synonymous.
They probably could be pretty fucking greedy. If they've amassed a large amount of wealth, there's a certain amount of greed, which is not necessarily the worst thing to be. But I don't know, Dane. Would you trust a 75-year-old geriatric man that can't even read a teleprompter to tell you exactly the tax code that he was going to provide for you? And that would you trust him implicitly with your own health and wellness and your fiscal responsibilities?
Well, I mean, absolutely not. But he's not ultimately going to be the one that writes the legislation.
But
his budget
no, but
just
he's
calls
the
for it.
face. He's the figurehead saying, I'm not going to tax you. I'm going to tax the rich. They haven't been paying their fair share for 25 years.
Pretty good impression. I like that one.
Pause. Repeat. They haven't been paying their fair share for 25 years.
Shake hands with somebody off camera, David.
Where am I? I tried to.
So I want to read you a quote from The Hill. And again, this source was specifically chosen because if The Hill isn't left of center, it's pretty neutral, right? This isn't Fox News. This isn't some, Milton Friedman. Again, I'm speaking derogatorily the way the Elizabeth Warrens of the world would.
That's a first for you.
This isn't some libertarian wet dream publication that's complaining about this. This is The Hill. And they say this about the proposal, quote, "This proposal should be alarming to all Americans as it would drastically expand the IRS's powers and create new complexity in the tax code. It could grow to hit millions of Americans over time, harm the economy, and is very likely unconstitutional. While Democrats claim this plan would only hit 700 taxpayers."
What?
Again, 330 million, Democrats say, well, there's only 700 people that are going to be hit by this.
I call bullshit. Go ahead.
It's likely that this tax would grow to hit millions of Americans. So that's what The Hill has to say about it.
It'll hit 700 the first time it's enacted. And then eventually, I think, Dane, this is what you're saying. Once the people that enact this thing are well out of office, or maybe at the very end when you can't really do anything to them for it, it's going to hit all the rest of us. I don't know, maybe the president that we are currently under might have been a member of a cabinet of another presidency that enacted a thing called Obamacare that started off really great. It was really cheap healthcare and then eventually grew into a fucking bloated fucking fiscal revenue engorgement of the insurance companies. I don't know. Maybe, just maybe. I don't know.
So here's the Epstein moment on this topic. And we have two. One was actually included in that Hill article. So again, you can find that linked below if you're on YouTube or at the website, wmdpodcast.com/106. And the point so they brought up one point, and then we have an additional one for you. They brought up the point of in terms of the Epstein moment, learning from history and that these people always fucking lie, is that the alternative minimum tax, which Congress passed in 1969, was targeted at 155 people who had arranged their tax affairs in such a way that they paid zero in taxes despite the fact that they had an adjusted gross income of $200,000. Now, I don't know about the inflation rate, but $200,000 in 1969 may not be $100 million today, but it's a lot, right? This was the ultra wealthy in 1969.
That was back when $1 would buy a whole fucking 5-pack of bubblegum.
Right. So $200K is a lot of money.
Suffice to say.
So that was passed by Congress in 1969, and fast forward to 2010, 30 million Americans are now subject to the alternative minimum tax legislation. That's 20% of all federal income tax filers. And it got so bad in terms of the burden on that 30 million Americans that aren't making, in today's dollars, $100 million. It got so bad that Congress had to step in and reduce the scope of the tax. So the promise is small group, super rich people. We need this. Play on your feelings of envy and greed and all that kind of stuff. Because as Thomas Sowell said, I always wonder why it's greedy to want to keep what you earned, but it's not greedy to want what somebody else earned. So yeah, greedy, Elizabeth Warren and AOC. So that's one historical example. David, would you like the other? It's a rhetorical question.
I feel
you're
like
getting
get it,
even
whether,
if you don't.
Okay, Kobe. Different meaning. Didn't see it coming.
That one snuck up on me. That one snuck up on me. Is it too soon? Passing to Kobe?
Sorry if it is. We joke, we kid because we care. Anyway.
All right. So the other historical example, and what I think is the more important of the two, because it impacts all 100% of federal taxpayers, is the Revenue Act of 1913. And that was the act.
Interesting way to say that, by the way.
That was the act piggybacking on the recent passage of the 16th Amendment, allowing for the federal income tax, because a lot of people don't realize before the passage of the 16th Amendment, the federal income tax was unconstitutional.
It's weird how it just changed on that year, that it went from illegal to legal.
Yeah, right around the establishment of the Federal Reserve. What a quinkadink. Anyway, so the Revenue Act of 1913, this was the original parameters of the proposal. So again, when the American people, speaking through their elective representatives, passed this legislation, here's what the American people were told. It's a 1% tax on incomes above $3,000 a year. Again, adjusting for inflation, you were doing quite well if you were making $3,000 a year in 1913.
What's 1% of $3,000?
1% with a top tax rate. It's $30, by the way.
I got it right. Thanks.
I thought you said 3.
No, I said 30.
Ah, good man.
I'm just a side illiterate in math.
With a top tax rate of 6% on those earning more than $500,000 a year. That's a massive jump. $3,000 a year. And then if you make over $500,000, $500,000 in 1913, you were subject to a maximum income tax
slamming it
of 6%.
You were slamming it at $500,000 in 1913. You could buy I don't even know.
Like half of New York City with $500K a year.
Right? Like you could buy pretty much the entire Midwest.
Right.
Why not?
Now, keep in mind, that range of people making $3,000 a year to $500,000 a year was, of all of the taxpayers, that was 3%. So 97% of taxpayers didn't have to pay the income tax under these parameters. 3% did. And of that 3%, the maximum they had to pay was 6%. Fast forward 100 years, every single person has to pay some form of federal income tax if they have income above, I forget what the threshold level is. It's super low. It's like 12 grand or 15 grand a year. It's super, super.
Like you can could do without some money if you made 12 grand in that year. You're doing all right.
You can work at McDonald's every other Tuesday for a year and basically meet the federal income tax threshold. So you want to talk about applying to everybody, it now does. And so not only does it apply to everybody, but what's the minimum federal income tax rate? It's something like 12, 15%, and the maximum is like 37, 36, something like that. So again, 3% of taxpayers had to pay a maximum of 6% to now all of the taxpayers essentially have to pay anywhere from roughly 10 to 15%, all the way up to a full third of their income. You see how it expands? And you see how the narrative never changes. It's always small group of people, super rich. They can take it. Government needs a little more money. What do you need it for? We can buy awesome, cool shit and totally not go to 2 world wars and, kill a bunch of people and then not take care of them when they come home.
And you know what?
We need more money.
You know what's funny about that is they always say people. They always say we're going to tax the rich. And when you hear the rich as a human, you go, oh, you mean just rich people. And the rich people, just like the conglomerate that I'm about to bring up after the rich people have lawyers that are going to find out after the first, maybe they'll get whacked the first time. Maybe. Kind of like last week when they said, we need to cut down our carbon emissions while they're getting in their, private jets and flying to and from, the World Economic Forums and so on and so forth. So the rich might get hit once because their accountants got caught off guard. But once they study this bill, they're going to find out loopholes. And then eventually they'll be right back down to paying less than you are, making 30 grand a year, making untold fortunes. And then caveat that with, they never even mention industry. They never even mention corporations. They never even mention the huge Pfizer. How much did Pfizer pay? After that fucking windfall of 2 years with the vaccine for the disease that no one saw coming, when do we see their tax records? Do they have to disclose them ever? I mean, they were coming after Trump's tax records. To and fro. Yeah,
I'm sure you could find just some sort of filings here.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and assume that that they filed, but they might have found ways around it. And to say that the rich people have lawyers that find their ways around it, that means that the corporations that they run or work for, yada, yada, or that run this country pretty much, they're going to have teams upon teams of lawyers that specialize in only finding their way through this. So, of course, the burden gets passed down to the individual.
Of course, you're not going to be able to afford.
Never. No. You're never going to be able to find your way around those loopholes.
Right.
And you're just going to pay out of pocket. And they're going to say, well, this isn't right 10 years down the road, even though they made the bill themselves and they knew that this is exactly how it was going to go. So it's, again, we're fighting over the few and the many.
And I intentionally left out a detail about this tax proposal for the end because I want you to see how just from those historic examples, which are talking about income tax, how bad it is in those contexts. But here's how much worse this one is versus those. This 20% tax is on unrealized capital gains. Think about that for 5 seconds. Unrealized capital gains means if you have an investment and it's worth more than you bought it at the end of the fiscal year, if that worth more than it was is on your books, you are taxed on that. Now, let's say you get to December. Let's just keep it simple with stock. Let's say you made $100 in the stock market on December 31st. You didn't sell. It's just in your account. That's how much you have. I mean, when David and I were in AMC last June, we had a huge capital gain if we would have sold. We didn't because we're apes and, apes together strong. Anyway, let's say you have $100 of unrealized gains in your stock market account on December 31st. And on January 1st, that stock tanks and now you're negative. You owe 20% on that $100, in addition to the fact that if you sell, you're at a loss anyway. So what you were taxed on, you never actually put in your pocket. Now you might say, oh, well, good. The wealthy, that's where they make all their money and, poor people aren't in the stock market. Well, to the Hill's point about how complex and how powerful this is going to have to make the IRS, Think about the detail of tracking the IRS they're going to have to look at every single asset you own. And they're going to have to, again, to the Hill's point about complexity, they're going to have to analyze if your used car appreciated this year, how rare that is, but it did because of the supply shortage. Your car appreciated. And so despite the fact that it burns gas and insurance money and everything else like that, you got to pay a tax on that thing that you use just to get to fucking work so you can pay your taxes. Unrealized capital gains is pitched out there to say only the wealthy, and again, only the wealthy are invested. Only the wealthy are going to suffer this. Bullshit.
Again, well, like they're writing all the rules, but are privy to none. Like, okay, so cool. When I lose money in my investments, do I get to pull money away from the government to make up for my loss? Because that's going to help me out. No, I don't. This just seems like another glass ceiling that they're imposing just to make sure you stay exactly where you're at so you'll own nothing and you'll be happier for it.
I mean, that's the middle road and this is why you cannot negotiate with terrorists, because some people are proposing the middle road solution is, okay, if you're going to allow this to happen, then do exactly what David said. Allow for a writing off of your taxes when you have unrealized losses. Because as it stands today, you have to realize the loss before December 31st to write it off. So this is what's called tax loss harvesting, is companies, hedge funds with big portfolios or whatever, when they're looking at, okay, am I going to fall into this bracket, that bracket? How much are we going to have to pay? At around November, December, they look at positions that they're losing on and they intentionally sell that stock then so that they can take the loss and use it as a write-off on their taxes. The middle of the road proposal is if you're going to tax unrealized gains, allow people to write off unrealized losses. And the reason why you cannot negotiate with terrorists and take the middle of the road is because if that middle ground is accepted, the same problems that we just talked about still go through. Just because you can write off unrealized losses doesn't stop them from, again, expanding the complexity and scope of the IRS to track everybody's assets all the way down to the last dime.
Unrealized loss. They'll change they're willing to change the definition of a recession. Yeah. You think they're not going to move the goalpost on you there? But Dane, what can we just surmise this in one phrase?
Yeah, Epstein didn't kill himself.
And taxation is what?
Theft.
There we go. It's his line. Didn't even hit the softball I lobbed.
Not mine. I can't claim
Well,
that,
I mean, it's like a shirt you wear pretty often.
So don't fall for that shit. And don't fall for that shit. Profound.
I
think somebody's going to put that on a shirt.
Don't fall for that shit.
And
taxes.
Don't fall for that
People
shit.
Don't fall for that shit.
All right.
The streets.
So moving on to the last topic on this episode, the main is, again, this is unless you're under a rock moment, the kerfuffle surrounding Pelosi's trip over to Taiwan.
We sent a geriatric over to a sovereign state.
Well, see, that's the problem. We didn't send shit. Not only did we, the people.
Contraire, mon frere. A representative of our country said, I'm going to go check on the chips that I just invested in.
David's using a meme that I'm about ready to destroy. I'm not saying that, he believes in it, but this is the meme that's always used, right? The government is the people, right? We elect our representatives, so the government is us. And the reason why that's bullshit is because not only did most of us, anybody that lives outside of our district, didn't vote for Nancy Pelosi, but we also didn't vote for her to be Speaker of the House. But nobody, even Biden himself, the Biden administration did not formally sanction her trip, give it permission. They just didn't say, don't go publicly. So pretty much all of us, all the way up to the president.
And none of us got any of the proceeds of her wonderful investments over the past couple of years.
Now,
if there's unrealized gains that we need to be fucking claiming, it's the Pelosi fucking investments that should be shared among the people. But now, go ahead, Dane. I digress.
To David's point, a cynical point, which, listen, I can cynical right along with the best of them, that she went over there for purely self-serving investment purposes, more insider trading information, as opposed to, saber rattling against our arch nemesis, China. In either case,
it's called pissing on an anthill.
That's exactly what it is. In either case, for little more than, and the irony is not lost on me considering she is a woman, the political dick measuring is really all this is.
I bet you she crip walked off the fucking off the plane, just fucking throwing her hands around. Could you imagine? Please, if someone's listening to this right now and is really good at like.
Oh man, like making gifts. Do like a Pelosi
just like a little
gift.
Fucking sits down the like round and shit, like fucking throwing out money as she goes.
How about this? I'm gonna Nancy Pelosi this shit and unilaterally make this decision for David and the rest of the crew on WMD podcast. If somebody does that and sends it to us,
please.
We want you to be a guest on an episode.
Ooh,
you pick the topic.
That's quite the.
You pick the topic.
We've got to be at least like 115 in Australia.
Somebody does
right
that. We want, email us and we'll get you on the.
As long as it won't get us canceled. You can't pick the topic.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
I have a job to protect. I know. Well, that's why we need more money so that this can be my full time. I don't have to answer anybody's job.
It's your fault at the end. There you go. Americans getting blamed for more shit that you didn't do.
I told you I was Pelosi in this bitch.
Okay, here we go.
So, for little more than that, because let's be honest, what did she go over there to do? Other than insider information on NVIDIA. What she would tell you she went over there to do is to show solidarity with Taiwan, who, again, a little bit of the local politics over there. China claims that Taiwan is part of China and the Chinese government has control, and Taiwan at least is still clinging to some semblance of independence. And that's the debate, so to speak, between China and the United States. So Pelosi would say, I went over there to show support for democracy and the Taiwanese people, to show them that America stands behind them and blah, 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 right? That's what she'll say she did. When in fact, all her actions did was make Taiwan more unstable in terms of the threat from China, make the already frosty relations between the United States and China, the two superpowers, if there are two, make those relationships frostier, just so she could go over there, stand behind a podium and and shout the same senseless platitudes that she can do from the Capitol. She can say, we stand with Taiwan and democracy forever. She can do that from the Capitol. She doesn't have to be on the soil in Taiwan.
Are you insinuating
yes.
that a politician did something politically driven for their own self-gain and just pissed off everybody else while doing it?
Yep.
God damn it, Dane. Is this the first time that this has
happened?
Nothing
sacred.
Is this the first time this has ever happened? God damn it, Pelosi.
And on the danger of that, I mean, this is...
Danger zone.
Think of how hypocritical this is in the context of Ukraine and Russia, right? Why does everybody have Ukraine flags in their bios? Because you rack up a lot of SJW points for saying, I care about the Ukrainian people.
Well, you're saying I'm part of the team.
Right. Yes, exactly that. But what I'm saying is, like, if I give their intentions the benefit of the doubt, they're saying I support these poor Ukrainian people, right? That's what you're saying. Just like you would say, I support these poor Taiwanese people. They're being oppressed by the Chinese, yada, yada, yada. So if those were your motivations, if those were Nancy Pelosi's motivations, I mean, she said as much while in Taiwan. If those were her motivations, why would she want to do something that would further jeopardize the safety and security of those people?
Why indeed?
Which is exactly what she did. So, and again, she did it for no reason other than to get inside information on NVIDIA or to basically say the same shit she could just say from the Capitol and not further provoke China.
But there were a bunch of cameras on her and she got a bunch of publicity not talking about NVIDIA, which changes the narrative of she just stole a lot more money to she's the freedom fighter. Look how amazing she is. She's standing up for human rights. Like, no, she's not. She's standing up for her clout. She's standing up for her, high school cool chicks party. Like, that's all she's doing. This is literally another huge fucking indication that all Congress is high school 2.0. That's all it is. Like, she's the prom queen. I just elected myself as prom queen and everyone needs to pay attention to me and all my friends are going to be the cool chicks. Like, when we walk down the street, you step aside, okay? Her crew, what is it called again? what do they call that? AOC?
The squad.
The squad. Oh,
Yeah.
Does that not sound like high school 2.0?
Yeah. And so for these vain, narcissistic, psychotic motivations of Pelosi, here's what we, the people, and the people of the world get for it. From Reuters, quote, China is halting cooperation with the United States in a number of areas, including dialogue between senior-level military commanders and climate talks.
That's never going to happen. Bad implications.
In retaliation for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. So just because of her high school level, and that's probably cutting her some slack and saying that it's even that mature, her high school level motivations, not just Taiwanese China and then China-United States relations a little bit more shaky, but pretty much global stability and peace. When you have the two most powerful countries on earth push, I don't care if it's marginal, a little bit closer to the brink on one person's vain pursuit of headlines and, oh, she's a strong, powerful woman, all of those narratives.
What did we gain? What did the United States gain from her going?
Nothing.
That's the bottom line. We didn't gain anything.
Well, that's putting America first, David, and that is racist.
Well, fuck.
Because I guess, America 27th would be acceptable.
Maybe she went.
Where's the line, people?
Maybe we don't know. Maybe she took all those gains from NVIDIA and took it over to Taiwan and gave it to them so they could build their nuclear arsenal so they can better defend themselves from China.
What a gal.
And then we'd, of course, have to step in to help Taiwan in that war. And she's going to be on the front lines, right?
Yeah.
Or at least she's going to vote for bills that will take care of the people that go over there and get blown up during the war that she just incited, right?
Yeah.
That happens every time.
Well, I'm going to close out this topic with a funny. It was either a meme or like a Babylon Bee headline. It was something like that. It said, this was before she had got over there when there were talks not China, I don't think China said this, but talks of shooting down her plane or whatever. And somebody had a headline that says, China promises to retaliate for Pelosi visit by letting her return home safely.
Damn it.
That's the way to really screw over America. Thanks a lot, China.
Fuck China. I mean, could have done us a favor. We never call for violence on this podcast.
No,
we would never do that. We would never do that.
This is all in jest. This is a meme. Ha ha ha. It's funny.
Ever. I want to reiterate. Ever. So anyway, Pelosi pushed us a little bit closer to midnight on the doomsday clock, huh?
A little bit closer.
A smidgen, like a 30-second increase. But at least cooler heads prevailed, and she got her face on camera more often.
Yeah.
And nobody asked her about insider trading.
Well, I just realized this about our show notes. We went from state level to federal to international in that order. We are really hitting all the levels of memery going on in this world.
And you didn't have to do that? We could have just said, we're getting better at this.
And listen, if you wanted to support us in continuing that mission, check the link below on this video. You'll be able to donate cash at the website or be able to donate Bitcoin straight to our wallet. But with that being said, David, did you have anything else to say on Comrade Pelosi?
I feel sticky and icky after you just said that out loud.
No, I'm doing it. I'll do it more.
Fucking do it.
I'm a terrible
but where can they find this goddamn podcast?
They can find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/106. They can find the podcast itself on any podcast catcher, Spotify, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, you name it. But then they can also get the videos on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble. And then they can also link up with us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter for more content during the week.
Twitter.
So, David.
Have these memes been successfully destroyed?
They have been.
Excellent. Well, if that's the case, Dane, then stay safe out there. And more importantly, stay free.